Yes. So I had the privilege of working on the national brand strategy, product launch, and over-the-counter switch for Narcan, which is a brand name version of the medication naloxone, which is a medication that allows you to reverse an opioid overdose and save somebody's life potentially. Um, I am a marketing executive. I work in advertising, brand, and marketing. I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional, but I did spend 2 years with Narcan and the company that owns Narcan as my client, building the communications and messaging that the marketing would go to market with, which did need to get approved by the CDC and regulatory bodies. So, what I'm going to share with you was what we were building and what we created on behalf of Narcan to communicate with people about the risks um, and how carrying naloxone, carrying Narcan, having it in your first aid kit at home. And I'm kind of sharing this not just for keeping the classrooms and kids safe and people, but it is now a modern first aid kit should have naloxone in it. You never know when an accident could happen, and I'll go through a couple examples of um, when accidents might unexpectedly happen. So I'm going to share a couple of slides, and then I'll give a little time at the end to ask questions because I may not cover everything. By the way, I worked on this in 2023 and 2024. So I've been off this for a bit, so I'm kind of refreshing my memory here. I work on a lot of different types of brands. Let me share my screen. Okay, so everyone can see that material. Um, Oh wait, this is not what I want to show. This is Narcan. And actually, before I'm going to come out of sharing screen for a second because I actually have some Narcan here. This is the product. This is what it looks like, and I'll have pictures on the slides as well. It's a nasal spray, and it comes in a pack that looks like this. If you buy a box of it, you'll get two of these. And these are 4 milligram doses each. If someone has a lot of fentanyl in their body and they have one of these administered and they still aren't coming around, usually an adult with a very high dosage and somebody who might have a substance use disorder and is, you know, um, accustomed to high doses, they might need a second dose. A child, probably not likely. So this is what it looks like. It's a plunger. Think about your allergy nasal spray like Flonase. It goes up your nose. You push on this red piece here. You only get one chance to push it. Once it's in, dose is done. It doesn't come back out. You can't spray it again. So that's why it's also good to have more than one of these. Usually we would encourage people to carry two. But this is what a dose of Narcan looks like. It is not a needle, does not go in your chest. It does not go in your arm. You can have naloxone administered intravenously. Most people who buy it over the counter that don't have substance use disorder or do not intravenously take illicit drugs don't use it that way. Some people do use it through a needle because they're comfortable with needles. So this is what Narcan is. And the whole thing around Narcan is that it saves a life by reversing the effects of an opioid accident. So if you have this medication, it is safe to use for children. If a child were to take this and spray it in their mouth, nothing would happen. If they sprayed it up their nose and they didn't have opioids of any kind in their body, nothing would happen. It is very benign medication. There are virtually no side effects. And so this is a very low risk medication also. The way it works is that when you take opioids, they bind to receptors in your brain, and this blocks those receptors. So any opioids in your system will no longer be allowed to bind to the receptors in your brain, and it can prevent you from having basically what can be fatal in an opioid accident is slowed breathing, and then heart failure eventually because you're not getting enough oxygen. So it'd be oxygen deprivation and then heart failure and then brain damage. And so that's the risk. You can buy this online. It is also available in the city, in a ton of locations. I worked on their national campaign. Um, New York is now public schools are expected to carry this and have this available. Um, and now in places like Brooklyn, this is going to be behind every bar. So you're seeing police officers will likely have this on them. Ambulances definitely have this on them. Um, this has become actually a really common tool in helping people, um, in the event of an accident. So this is now as part of the work that I was lucky to be a part of. In the Obama administration, they pushed to have this put over the counter because the more access to this medication, it used to be a prescription drug, the more access to this medication, the more lives will be saved. Um, the reason people don't carry this very often is because they think, I don't know anyone who takes illicit drugs. I'm not going to be in a situation where I might need this. And so I don't need to have it in my first aid kit or on my person. And the work that I did, we did a lot of market research where we talked to people. And sadly, 77, this is, old data, so 2023, 2022 probably, 77% of opioid overdose deaths happen at home or non-clinical settings. Fentanyl is used in hospitals. Anyone who gets an epidural, there's fentanyl in it. It is actually a really important medication in medical settings for anesthesia. So it is now being illicitly used, and that's when it becomes dangerous because it's not used in a medical setting in a controlled way. So, but you do actually have, even in hospitals, this medication being administered sometimes. But most of these opioid accidents that happen are happening outside of clinical settings, and usually somebody's there, a friend, a neighbor, a parent, a partner. And if you don't have this medication, you're not able to act when there's the ability to actually do something. So that was a big part of why this is the packaging before we actually got it out. And then this was a woman that we did market research with who, like one of many, many people that would say to us, I don't think I would need this product. It sounds like a great idea, but I don't need it because I don't know anybody like that. This is what we call stigma. So, the feeling that it's for illicit drug users only, that it's, for a certain type of person, is the way that this limits the adoption of a medication that has the potential to save lives, and quite easily. So understanding, it's almost like some of the work that we did was trying to get it to be as prevalent as, say, the Heimlich maneuver. You go into any restaurant, and OSHA requires a poster on the wall that shows how to do the Heimlich maneuver and save someone from choking. You go into an airport and there's a defibrillator to revive somebody if they have a heart attack. Now you're starting to see this medication next to defibrillators because, unfortunately, when we were doing this campaign work, opioid overdose death was the number one cause of accidental death in the United States. Number one, more than falling, more than drowning, more than car accidents. This was more common way to a person to pass in the country. Now we have seen a 25% decline in opioid accidents that are fatal in the US. And a huge part of that is thanks to medications like this. It's not the only reason. There are a lot of other reasons, but it's really kind of miraculous what has been possible with taking a multi-pronged approach to combating the impact of opioid use in this country. So I'm just going to answer a couple of training specific questions. If you are going to carry this medication, especially if you are going to carry it to the playground or park with your class as something that in case an accident were to happen, God forbid a child picked up one of those trash cans, there's fentanyl in it. They put it in their mouth because they think it's fun or funny, or they're just, exploring and curious. And they ingest fentanyl and start to, have negative effects, particularly if it were a high dose. The signs of an overdose are you look unusually sleepy. You'll probably see someone starting to slump over. Breathing will slow down. So the chest will go slower, more shallow. Heartbeat will slow down. Skin will start to feel cold. That's from not getting enough oxygen. Pupils will get smaller. Your lips and nails may start to turn blue. This is oxygen deprivation again. Um, these are some of the signs. Now, other things can cause that. If you're not sure and you think there might be a chance, spray it because nothing will happen if the person's having a heart attack or some other effect that looks like an opioid accident, and it's not. This is such a benign medication that if you were to administer it and no opioids were in the system, it wouldn't do anything. Um, so usually you have some time if there is someone experiencing an opioid overdose accident. Um, when you administer this, we had just as part of the campaign work that we developed, we changed the kind of shorthand to try to help people remember what to do because when you're in a situation where there's somebody potentially not breathing, it's scary. And so how do you remember what to do? You lay the person on their back, open the package, put your thumb right here under the plunger, the pink plunger, and put your fingers here. You put it up their nose. So you lay them on their back. This is, just like kind of a safety precaution. Spray it up their nose and hold the tip in place, put it up far and spray it up their nose. And then you stay with them. So you do have to call 911. You do want to make sure that, an ambulance is showing up. And this is sometimes when an ambulance comes, they'll administer, depending on the scenario, they may administer more. This medication can wear off over time. So you can't just, and this is, not really going to be the case with children, but I'm just going to give you the whole, in case, any scenario comes up. If someone were to spray this and think, okay, now they're fine, because in illicit drug use situations, people are afraid of the police coming and people getting arrested. New York City laws protect you from repercussions if you are saving a life and calling 911 to come help, even if illicit drugs are present. So if, for example, in a home setting, someone has illicit drugs, they were using illicit drugs, you administer this, no one's going to go to jail because, or you're not going to go to jail because administering this and calling 911 to save a life. That is a situation that people get a little bit worried about. So you lay them on their back, spray it up their nose, stay with them. You can put them into the recovery position. This is, sometimes you can administer a second dose, but usually a person will start to come around and become noticeably and visibly more responsive. Now, I will say this is my own personal anecdotal advice, I suppose, as again, like a non-physician, but someone who did a lot of research and market research in the area. Administering this to people on the street that you don't know can come with risk. People can become violent when they go through substance withdrawal if they have substance use disorder. So this is, to be done with caution. If you're, say you see someone on the subway, for example, you don't know them and you think, oh my gosh, something might be happening. Usually you try to, sir, ma'am, wake up, can you hear me? Wake up. A sternum rub is always also a good way to check if someone is conscious. And we did talk quite a bit about, people can wake up and come through extreme withdrawal when they have this administered, because if they have a lot of opioids in their system, they're intentionally ingesting opioids, and then it's taken away from them, the withdrawal can be very quick. Obviously that's not in the case of children, but just something to be aware of. Dosage information. This is a 4 milligram dose. You can get higher doses, especially for people with substance use disorder. Call 911. You can give recovery breaths also. And I can share some of this. All of this is on Narcan's website, narcan.com. There's public health sites, the materials that Susan sent around from New York City Gov are fantastic. They're really clear. Um, that person might go through, as I mentioned, sudden withdrawal. So here's some of the symptoms that a person going through opioids withdrawal might have. Um, and then I think one of the things that is just interesting to put out there, because we were talking about stigma, and one of the biggest things, this is opioid overdoses being part. Oh, let me go back to my slides. Geez, I'm talking like I'm sharing these, and I'm not. Opioid overdose deaths being, one of the leading accidental causes of death in the United States. I just want to go to this for a second because I thought I was sharing and I wasn't. This is the shorthand. Lay them down, spray it up their nose, stay with them. If that's all you can remember, it's that simple. These are the symptoms. All of this is on their site, though, if you want to familiarize yourself further. I have seen people who used to give presentations and trainings actually administer this themselves in the training just to show how safe and benign it is when there's no opioids present. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to waste it, but this medication, as I mentioned, the biggest thing that we learned in our research and a huge part of the work that we did building the national campaign was people thought, I don't need to be ready. I don't know anybody who's going to need it. It could never happen to me. I don't know people who might have an accident like this. Anyone receiving a prescription medication with an opioid in it could be at risk. In some states, they require prescribing this with, you have to get this filled alongside an opioid prescription. So anything like Percocet, Valium, like these kinds of medications, Xanax, Klonopin, these are opioids. So it's not just fentanyl. People who have serious health conditions like cancer or HIV or COPD or Parkinson's disease often do take opioids for pain management. And that being on multiple medications at the same time can put you at risk for an accident. All you have to do is, my mother actually had a physician's assistant fill a muscle relaxant prescription with an opioid and put her in the ER. And it was an accident. They were extremely apologetic, but it was just a mistake in the prescription fill. And they gave her this in the hospital. We didn't know that that's what had happened. Children can accidentally ingest it. They can accidentally ingest it from a medicine cabinet at home. They can find it out on the street. You do see people over the age of 65 more likely to fill an opioid prescription than under 65. Substance misuse patients, this is what you're hearing about, kind of street and illicit fentanyl. Now, there's kind of two ways that people in that scenario may have an accident that are the most prevalent. One is they're intentionally ingesting heroin, fentanyl, other opiates. The other is you think you're buying a pill of ecstasy and it's cut with fentanyl and you're having an opioid poisoning. This is happening much more. People think they're buying cocaine and it's cut with fentanyl. This is, Robert De Niro lost a grandson this way last year. You're seeing this scenario play out more. Now, if young people have this on them, it's called harm reduction. If you are using any illicit drugs or anyone who's using illicit drugs in any capacity at all, this should be available. People should not use illicit drugs by themselves, ever. The idea of getting people to stop using illicit drugs, teetotal, and never talk about it is what keeps people more at risk because it's continuing to happen and it's not happening safely. So having this in a household, if you don't know, illicit substance use happens often in secret. You don't know what's going on. Next thing you know, you're, in an emergency situation. Having this is going to be better than not. People who have acute or chronic pain, more likely to be on an opioid. You see people who come from certain backgrounds also. athletes, military people in physical jobs, people who have pain more often, being prescribed opioids more. And then certain communities are being, um, at a slightly higher risk. This works within minutes. It can restore breathing if it's slowed or stopped. Um, there's very, very low risk of interaction. So if you're not sure and you think there's a chance, you're better administering it than not. This was the campaign that we put out there, trying to encourage people to look at this as a positive. Like it's scary. I'm not gonna lie. Like the thought of my son being on a playground where he could ingest fentanyl is, and I'm sure lots of other parents and yourselves as teachers think, gosh, I never want to see that happen. But what would be worse is to not be able to do something about it when it's possible. So everyone has the power to save a life now. Everyone can go get this medication. It is widely available. It wasn't 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Now this is widely available and it can reverse an emergency from being fatal. And then
And
this is what it looks like in store.
Jen, one of the things that I think you said, or I read
Mhm.
it someplace, was if you touch those little
Yeah.
capsules, that you would not be at risk. It's really when you ingest it, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes. There's some misinformation. You may see headlines out there that say fentanyl is so strong that it can be airborne and you can have an overdose from just breathing it in. That is not true. There are no real reported cases of that happening in a meaningful way. You'll see occasionally news stories where it's like the police have, confiscated pounds and pounds of the stuff raw and inhaled it and passed out. Usually it's some strange coincidence and it's kind of like not real information. Um, you know, any physician working in this space would tell you that um, that's not how opioid accidents happen. If a child were to touch it, if you were to touch it, you're not going to get it through your hands. You're not going to have an accident through your hands. It's really only through ingesting it. But there, and here's the thing: I want everyone to like not be terrified that this is going to be a huge risk, because while the numbers of accidents are high, they're very specific scenarios. The cohort that has the highest overdose fatality rate is actually men in their like mid 30s to 40s. And usually it's substance use related. Now, that's not to say that other accidents can't happen, but um, the likelihood of something happening is very, very slim. But at the same time, I have an allergy kid. I carry my EpiPen for him everywhere. Why would I not have this if I'm going outside and I know that there's fentanyl containers on the ground? Because he's literally picking up every rock and stick at the moment, every piece of anything he finds. So, yes, no fear of airborne or contact through skin accidents. I hope that was helpful.
Yes,
Uh,
very much
I'm
so.
happy to take any questions.
I was just going to add that we are in the process of ordering more kits, so we can hopefully have a complete kit for each backpack, and then some in the office as well. But that's
Great.
not happened yet completely.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions? Can you just unmute over there or go up to the?
The question was the price of the spray.
That's a really good question. When we went to market, I remember it was what it used to cost, but that was a few years ago. Let me look it up. You can buy it. I think it's becoming generic, so I think you can buy it for less. It's available on Amazon.
We also
Narcan,
have some sites that you can go to and sign up for a free kit, so we'll send those out to everybody.
yes. So Narcan, if you wanted to go buy some and have it shipped to you on Amazon like overnight, $34. That's branded. Now, if you go buy unbranded, it would be less money. And if you apply for the city, and I can share a link, like there are harm reduction organizations and nonprofits that will mail you it for free. I got this for free from an organization called Next Distro, which is a harm reduction organization. The city buys a bunch of Narcan and naloxone as part of public benefit.
I have a question. How long after the overdose happened until we are able to administer the Narcan?
As soon as you see symptoms of any sort of nodding off, loss of consciousness, you want to administer it right away. Every case of how long it might take for an opioid accident to become fatal would be different based on how much opioid toxicity has been ingested. But I think I'll have to look it up. Let me look it up because I think it's basically how long you can go without breathing after, like if breathing were to get so shallow and stop. But I think it really depends on how much was ingested. If it's not a lot, but you want to administer it right away if there's a lack of consciousness.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for all this. I'm hopefully not in the minority here. I've never seen fentanyl. What if it's in the container? Are we looking for a powder, a liquid? What do we need to recognize?
It can come in a powder, for the most part. Some people are cooking the powder into a liquid, but you're most likely just going to see it in a powder. It can also be in a pill because, as I mentioned earlier, it's being compounded into counterfeit pills and shipped into the country or compounded here. And so counterfeit pills is another way that it can be ingested. But it's typically a white powder. Can be off-white, can be tan. The thing to know is that fentanyl can be 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin, depending on the toxicity of it. So, when the problem with illicit drugs is there's no regulation of it's this much toxicity. So that's why I think, they sell these in 2-packs because sometimes the toxicity is high. You're administering multiple doses. It's usually going to last for 30 to 90 minutes in terms of its effect. So, if someone were to lose consciousness and start to slow their breathing and slump over and, basically start to pass out, you would yell, somebody call 911 while you, kind of try to administer this and give recovery breaths, if you're comfortable with that.
Any other questions?
We put 2 in the chat.
Oh.
2 in the chat.
Do children have the same symptoms as adults? And what is the shelf life?
I think, let me just look up. The shelf life, I believe, was 2 to 3 year expiry date. If you have one that's expired, it's better than not administering anything if you're in a situation. I will say that, as a non-medical professional, but a lot of people keep these in their car. The company that sells this would say don't do that because heat can mess with the compound of it. But honestly, it's going to still probably work. Can go up to 4 years lifespan. And then what was the other question? Oh, what does it look like in
Children's symptoms the same as adults?
Yes, same. Bluish skin, breathing slows, shallows. can turn gray or ash kind of skin. Choking sound sometimes, maybe vomiting, but most likely it's just going to be passing out. And like they can get cold and clammy. It really slows everything down, slows the heart down, slows the breath down. They're non-responsive. You yell their name to them, they don't respond. That's one of the things you would do immediately. A big, can you hear me? Rub the sternum, say their name, try to get them to come around. If they cannot, that's when you really need to start kind of, okay, what's next? Start administering life-saving medication and breaths. The thing that's complex about it is there are other things that can cause somebody to pass out. The peace of mind is if you administer it and this is not what's going on, nothing is going to happen negative as a side effect.
If you see a child that's not breathing and turning blue, what would be your first guess?
If I were in a scenario where there's no opioids present, I'm not going to assume that there's some sort of opioid accident. But if I were at a playground and there's a fentanyl, object nearby, or you're out in the world and there's no clear answer, usually, and that's the tricky part of it, to be honest. Like I mentioned earlier, my mother had an OD when she had a very severe illness, a chronic autoimmune, not sorry, my dad's autoimmune, a chronic Parkinsonianism, and had taken the wrong medication, been filled with the wrong medication. We didn't know she took the med. So like we found her slumped over, the ambulance came, they administered it in the hospital because even the ambulance didn't realize. So it's kind of a gray area because you can be other things that cause people to pass out. You can faint from heat exhaustion and not be responsive.
So for teachers, what's the teacher's guess if you saw a child that was slumped over, not breathing?
I think if it's in your classroom, you can safely assume there's no opioids present. But if
I'm
it's
asking the teachers if we
okay.
could answer that question.
Sorry.
That's okay. Anybody want to take a guess?
We're saying choking here at CPM.
Yeah, choking. Choking for us is like so
Common.
would be the
Yeah.
most prevalent. So if you see something like that, choking may come first. So check for all that. We do all the ABCs check and go from there.
Yeah, I really want to reiterate, like the likelihood of an accident like this happening to a child at your school is like really, really slim. Like it would probably be on the news. It's very uncommon. It would be considered an accident. It's not likely, but given that this medication exists, it's better to be prepared. And since we've been finding those fentanyl doses on the playgrounds, it's quite unfortunate.
Thank you so much for bringing this awareness to us. And
yeah, I'm happy to help. I hope it's useful. Again, I'm not a medical professional. That's why it's more of a layman's terms, but I hope that it just kind of opens eyes to, and I would honestly encourage to have it at, in your first aid kit, because it is just like a modern first aid kit has this in it. You never know. Like I live in an apartment building with a bunch of neighbors, and I used to just carry it in my purse. And there was someone actually that needed help and I didn't have to administer it, but I was very ready to. Luckily, there was two other people with me that were former paramedics. And then the paramedics came and then she came around. But anyway, this happened to me while I was working on this, like just went out for a lunch break. And this woman was asking me for help. So, you really never know. This is New York City.
all right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, everyone. I hope that's valuable.
Thank you.
Bye.